Hi everyone, I was just getting set up. Sorry. I'm Michelle Renee Hyatt, and thank you for joining me on today's designer tip and technique tour. We are doing this special thing for since everybody is stuck at home. So, apologies, I overlaid this video because when I was taping it live, my phone started ringing. But basically, this was recorded as part of a designer's tips and technique tour that we did during the first week of May. And these are my tips on selecting fabric, especially using fat quarters. I didn't realize until I started designing patterns and mysteries using fat quarters that people actually get a little freaked out about pulling fat quarters. I haven't met a fat quarter pack that I don't love. So it was news to me. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips and tricks on that. And the tips will really work for any pattern that you would want to use. But I'm going to try and focus specifically a couple things on fat quarters. So the first thing to do is not to panic. Okay, just like when the phone rings and you're trying to live stream. Anyhow, as designers, we often give you tips, and those are things you're going to really want to pay attention to. Those would include a color palette or scale, value, things like that. And most designers will include them on the back of their pattern, and that's where you'll find them on mine. I have a fabric requirements section, and typically I will give you hints like light pink or medium blue to let you know if you're going to replace that color that you still want to honor that value. I'll also write some things in the description in the back, and then I typically do an overview in the front of the pattern, which would give you things like this would be a great place for a large scale print, or this would be a great place for tone on tone, or you might want to consider solid or tone on tone batiks, things like that. So you really want to pay attention to the things that the designer provides you in the pattern. All right. So for my mystery quilt, what I did is I asked them to come up with 24 to 28 28 fat quarters. We were going to, it's a holiday medallion, but it doesn't need to be holiday fabric. So they can start off there. But one of the important things that I gave them was that it has to be high contrast to their background. And the reason that that is so important, and if your designer calls that out, is because sometimes in this particular case, the pieces are going to be so small that it would be best if they were a high value so that they don't get lost in the pattern. Also, there's times when it will affect the design, such as with my Starflower Surprise pattern here. If you did not pick a light fabric to push so that it falls back and creates those circles, you would lose some of the design element, just like my Jen's Journey, which is a snail's trail pattern. If you did not include something that was high contrast, you could lose the snail. And that's the whole part of the design, is that you can see it. So pay attention to those types of things. The other thing that I told them to do was that they should have a various amount of light, medium, and dark. So, for instance, you would want to ensure that you had fabric that was a light, a medium, and a dark. For people who don't think yellow has variations, that yellow is always light, that's not the case. I also told them to have various scale. And so scale is like this, more of a solidish, a blender, a tone on tone, a small print, a medium print, or a larger print. So there was going to be a place for everything. So it's just making sure that you find the right place for it. The next thing is really the color scale. So I'm going to put this aside for a second. In my particular pattern, the color plan doesn't matter as much. There's no specific, but in some cases you will need to have, some patterns will say that it needs to be a complementary, or so complementary is directly across the color wheel. split complementary, which is across the color wheel, and then a various amount on one side or the other or both. Or you could have a triadic color plan, which are on a 24 color wheel. They are spaced 8 apart. Or it could be an analogous color plan where all of them are next to each other. If you were to pick that for my particular mystery and analogous plan, you would want to definitely make sure that you've paid attention and have various amount of value and various amount of scale of prints, because it's going to add some interest to the quilt. All right. If these terms are a little foreign to you, I'm going to dive a little bit into them today, but check with, many of us designers are running virtual classes. I happen to have a couple color classes coming up. I'm sure many of your other favorite designers have a lot of virtual classes as well. So those are something you might want to check out. Learning color at home is really great because you can immediately put it to use in your own stash. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started here. So the original plan that I had done the pattern for, the mystery, is using a holiday theme. So the first thing you want to do is, if you pick up a fat quarter pack off the shelf, one of the things that you want to do is analyze it and determine, can I use this full pack in my pattern, or are there fabrics that I'm not going to be able to use? So my background is basically a pretty solidish off-white creamy ivory that I've picked to go with it. So I already know that I'm probably going to have a problem, given that my first direction was high contrast to background. So these may give me some problems. There might be places where I can put them that are not directly against the background. So I'm going to keep them readily available, but I may not be able to use them as often as the rest of the prints. So the next thing I asked for was a value. So we have things that are going to read as a medium, as a light, more as a dark. I asked for a difference in scale. So because I'm going to run short here, I'm not going to come up to the 24 because I had to discount several of them. I'm going to go ahead in and add some solids, which is typically my go-to if I need to augment a fat quarter pack. So in here, I'm actually still adding, as you can see, some value. I have some lighter shades, some darker shades. So I'm trying to mirror what I have in here. So that's going to give me my solidish scale, if you would. And then I have some very small prints, and then I have some very large prints, and I have some medium prints. This cuts mustard, right? This will work, hence why I picked it. All right, so that tells you a little bit about, or shows you a little bit about, using some of your fabric that comes in a fat quarter pack. Now, this one here, this goes to the other end of the spectrum, and this is going to be my second version that I'm going to use in my mystery. So here I have, and I absolutely adore Allison Glass's sun prints. And I decided to use the charcoal gray, almost registers as a black. So I'm going to need to be careful again with these two that came in the color pack because they're very close. And even some of the grays are going to, you know, I don't know that they're going to play well up against it directly. And then the white would be extremely stark. Not saying there won't be a place for them, but it might be a little bit of a challenge. Now, if you look at these, I've already broken one of my rules in that I really don't have a wide variety of value. For the most part, these are all going to read medium to medium dark. So instead of going with maybe just 2 colors like I did with my holiday print, I've elected to go with something that has 6+ fabrics, and that's going to add some interest. So while I'm breaking the rule of value, I'm still following the rule of adding interest, and I'm still following the rule of scale. I have some prints here that are very tone on tone, from a distance would look like a solid. I have fabrics here that show a little bit of interest, small prints. I then have some that have more of a medium-ish print. And I don't probably have too much that has a dark, a large scale print. Maybe a little bit in what I call the cross stitch, the woven piece, that there is some larger design going on here, but for the most part it reads as a tone on tone. So that's a way, if you love a fat quarter pack that has colors that are all reading about the same level in value, that you can add interest to your fat quarter quilts in picking something that has the 6+ colors. All right, so let me move this off to the side. Now, maybe your favorite quilt shop isn't open at this time, and you are stuck going through your stash. Imagine that, right? You have to use your stash. Let me just move this around a bit. All right, so this one I challenged myself. Actually, these all came from my stash, which I'm a little frightened about, but anyhow. So this pick here, and not all these are fat quarters, so they're a little, so you'll notice some pieces are a little bigger, but I challenged myself to come up with maybe a fall theme, right? Since my medallion quilt mystery is Christmas theme, I let them know, you know, it can really be used for anything, and I really think it would be a really fun fall print. So I challenged myself, and I am very, if you know me, it is very difficult for me, despite this quilt behind me, to use orange and also red. I rarely use red, so, but I actually have it in my stash, although it was a little bit more difficult for me to pull. So here you can see again, I have the scale, right? We talked already about the light, medium, and dark. And then I have definitely some tone on tone. I have some larger print. I have some medium print. I probably want to be a little careful with this darker red against the black. I know it's probably a little hard for you to see there, but it will, you know, I'll just be careful in placement for it. But this shows you an example. If you dig deep into your stash, you can find many different fabrics to go together in a what would be a fat quarter quilt. Don't be afraid to mix, you know, dots with flowers and such. You know, it's in a fat quarter quilt, there are so many fabrics that's what's great about it, is it ends up looking like a scrap quilt, and it really has a lot of interest. All right, so that would be my pull from stash, using more traditional-ish prints, I guess. They're primarily art gallery. There's a few that aren't. Then I went in and I dug in and I got these out. This is a really old set of fabric. Well, not really old, but probably 5+ years. All right. Here I decided to go with a white on white. And this one I wanted to do a split complementary color plan. So on this, I wanted to use a blue with like an orangish, right? So blue and orange are almost against, you know, are pretty much on the opposite side of the color wheel, giving me one set of complementary. And then I went with the green and the more pink, and that is another complementary. So in this scheme, I have working 2 complementary color plans that really look nice together. And these are not all from the same fabric manufacturer. These are from actually 2 to 3 different ones that I kind of grouped together. I did purchase them at the same time in one of the shops and going around and pulling things out, but they were not together like in a fat quarter pack. So it just goes to show you, you just, you know, you kind of poke around. I know right now it's not that easy, but you can still poke around online. Come on. All right. Again, I have various value, right? I have my lights. I have my more darks that are reading. I have small prints. I have medium prints here as far as medium, and then also medium in scale. And then my larger prints. And again, there will be places where large prints will work, and there's going to be places where large prints won't work. In a smaller piece, you have to be mindful that when you're looking at the pattern, if it has a bunch of small pieces, that's probably not the place for your large scale prints. But, you know, borders are always a great place. But then there's traditionally something that has a larger unit. So large scale prints need to find their way to large units, if that makes sense. Okay, so this here is another great combination, split complementary or dual complementary actually, and it works great in my mind. I have to tell you, when I was pulling these out, it's everything I can do not to start another colorway. And I'm like, 2 is enough to be a challenge. All right. So for those of you who don't believe that I know anything that's not bright, you can see here I have a bunch of Joe Mortons. And this one I'm going to use basically a gold background on. And so what I did is similar. This is almost a triadic color plan. I have my red, green, and blues going on. It really would have been yellow, but I didn't have that many golds. So I kind of cheated the triadic color plan and just moved over a bit to the green. I have a few that here are yellow-green, but it still works as it's very appealing. These 3 here, again, I really couldn't use them against my background, but there might be a spot that I could use them, and I loved them when I was pulling them out. So again, pick something that you love. If you absolutely hate your fabric selection, that quilt is going to end up in the UFO bucket. So make sure you love it. All right, even if you're doing it for someone else. I personally, if I'm making a quilt for someone else, I don't give them the opportunity to pick out the fabric. I might say, what colors do you like? But I'm going to pick what I like, because if I don't like it, I'm not doing it. All right, it doesn't get done. All right, so in here, again, so while it's, reproduction, it still has, the difference in colors. We still have a great color plan going. We still have a tone on tone. We still have some small prints. There's some really cute ones in here. We still have some larger prints that I've pulled, I should say. And I still have things that are going to read a little bit lighter, a little bit darker, in the middle, my mediums, these are going to show up a little bit as lighter. I probably could have done a few more lights in here, but you basically get the idea here. All right, so I have just a few more here for you. Hopefully I'm not boring you. This here is something that I pulled out from my most recent blog post. So again, I challenged myself to go through and just pull some of my more brighter patterns out and see if I could come up with a triadic color plan. So orange green, or orange yellowish green, and purple come out to a nice triadic color plan. All right, so you get the idea here, right? So again, I tried to look for various scale. There's a couple in here that just aren't going to cut it. They're just way too big for me to use, or they jump out, they kind of clash. So if I scale back, this just isn't the right purple. This has too much white in it. This has too much geometric shapes that I think are going to be distracting. These here I just find kind of clash, so I'm going to remove them. And over here, again, large scale, not sure how this is going to land in blocks. I'm only doing 6-inch blocks, so I'm really not sure that these are going to make it. So the one thing I'm definitely missing here, I feel like I've gotten my lights, my mediums, and my darks, but I'm missing a small scale print. I have a few that might make it a small scale, but I don't really think so. So I go into my bucket of coordinates. I keep a tote, let's be honest, totes of my tone on tone fabric, my blenders, and it's my go-to bucket for when I need something to fill in, because I love the big bright prints of Cave, Tulip Pink, and such. But let's be honest, in order for them to succeed in a quilt, they need a soft landing place. So whether or not you're doing a fat quarter quilt or a regular quilt, you know, using yardage, you're always going to need some sort of blender. So I went in and I pulled a few more tone-on-tone prints and some medium prints. And I think these go really well. And they fill in a little bit of my need for some fabric. And I felt on this side I was definitely missing a deeper purple. So I pulled that. All right. And then if you wanted to, you could add some more solidish tones. Now these aren't, this here happens to be a grunge. It's not completely solid. But there I go. And I've taken, you know, my pull from my favorite bin and then brought in some blenders to make it work. So don't be afraid to go, you know, poking around in your fabric. All right, I'm going to do one more for you. Here, this is a fat quarter bundle that I pulled out of my stash. Yes, I know, it's all scary. But I think this will work, right? It has blue, pink, green. So green and pink we know are opposite sides of the color wheel, and blue and yellow are pretty close. So there's two things I felt were missing in this. I felt that the yellows were underserved, right? I think that it needs a little bit more yellow. So again, I could go to my blender and pull out. I think it definitely needed a darker yellow. It might need some green, right? So I could pull out some additional green. I think it still needs some yellow. So again, going in and finding something to add up that yellow. So now I feel like I have a pretty good balance of larger scale prints, medium prints, tone on tones, small prints. I feel like I have some lighter, some darker fabrics, right, that read a little darker, and definitely some mediums. All right, so that's my tips on pulling out fabric, whether or not you've purchased a fat quarter pack, how to analyze it, to how to augment a fat quarter pack, how to pull from stash that you love and how to make it work, as well as pulling out a theme with the fall colors, or in pulling out, you know, getting your mind around that you want something that pops against each other, so you're going to pick that complementary color plan and make it work. So that's my tips. So I hope the tips were great, and I hope I see you again sometime in the future. Thanks. Bye.